Today's episode of Overdue Finds is brought to you by EPL's new mobile app. Keep the Edmonton Public Library in your pocket. EPL Mobile makes it easy to discover titles, classes and events, manage your EPL account, check branch hours, and so much more. Download the latest version of the EPL mobile app from the App Store or visit EPL.ca/membership for more details. Hi, I'm Bryce Crittenden.
Hi, I'm Caroline Land, and welcome back to EPL's Overdue Finds.
Caroline, episode 50?
Happy 50th episode, Bryce.
Yes, happy 50th episode to you as well. It's kind of interesting with today being our 50th episode. Feels like a little bit of an end of an era because we're actually recording at our Enterprise Square branch for the very last time, which is where really we record we've recorded like 98% of our episodes.
Yeah, so this is kind of bittersweet in a way.
It is a little bit. You might be able to hear like a fan. All of a sudden, like after we've done all these episodes here, if you hear something in the background, it's a fan. We don't know where it's coming from, but
that's the mystery and magic of podcasting.
It is. And so this is kind of cool though, because obviously we're going to be in a transition to the new Stanley Milner branch, and we're going to have a nice fancy new studio over there in just a few months' time. So
yeah, we're really looking forward to it.
We are. And also, too, we just want to say before we get started today, big thank you, by the way. We've hit 50 episodes, and really we wouldn't have been able to hit 50 episodes without the listeners and the positive feedback we've gotten, and really everybody who's listened and reached out to us. We just want to say thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, and we have a special guest with us today.
We do. Joining us for the second time. Ironically enough, last time he was on was episode 25.
The silver episode.
The silver episode. So what's 50 then?
Golden. It's golden.
Oh, so it's our golden episode.
I think this might be an interesting Overdue Finds tradition. So my question to you guys is, hey gang, what are we doing for the Diamond episode?
Yeah, we need to start thinking about episode 75. And by the way, thank you very much. Welcome back, Diego Ibarra.
Hello.
Yes. Make sure we get your name out there.
Diego was actually on last year. It was almost like
about
a year
this
ago.
Time, yeah.
Because we were doing our episode on March Madness.
That's right. Yeah, in which we got a chance to create these brackets full of adapted films. And in the end, even though it wasn't necessarily everybody's pick, the listeners of Overdue Finds, they all, I guess, unanimously chose The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
We had a clear and distinct winner there.
I'm still choked about Jurassic Park not being in that tournament, but that's okay. I've gotten over it. The public has spoken.
Yes.
Princess Bride is the best movie based on a book.
Yeah.
So that's all right.
We will actually be coming back to talk about March Madness at the end of this episode.
We will. We're very, very big announcement for everybody. But today, though, we're still talking about movies a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, we are actually, not a little bit.
For the episode.
Yeah. So we are today obviously talking about movies, and because we're into awards season, so today we're going to be talking about the biggest snubs in Oscars history, according to us anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, you'll find some articles online, but we're going to be sharing our thoughts today as we go through the episode. Today we're going to be talking about who we thought should have won for Best Picture, Director, Actor, and Actress. So we're going to go through our picks for that a little bit later on. But before we get there, of course, let's start with our Overdue Finds picks. Diego, what have you been enjoying lately?
Excellent question. When you work at a library, of course, you get a chance to really sort of share workspace with a lot of people with varied tastes and very sort of cultivated tastes, and they're cultivated in different sort of aspects as well. So I have a colleague at the Idlewild branch, Taryn Hunchak, who is probably, for my money, like one of the best readers of YA fantasy, or just young fantasy in general. And she had been talking about like how she had felt it was sort of like she really needed to sort of promote the works of Diana Wynne Jones to people in general. More people should be reading Diana Wynne Jones. And I thought, hang on, I'm a people, and I'm usually really sort of down for anything. So I sort of took on that challenge, and she recommended a couple of Wynne Jones for me, or Jones, I should say. The first one, most people have heard of. She had written, of course, the fantasy novel Howl's Moving Castle, which, of course, is also well known for being adapted by the great Hayao Miyazaki. But while I enjoyed it, while it was good, what was actually the better of the two books was actually The Lives of Christopher Chant. So this is part of a longer series of hers that I have not read into a great deal. But it features a Christopher Chant who's sort of living on an alternate Earth where magic and not technology sort of wind up sort of developing the world. And he winds up sort of discovering that he has been blessed with 9 lives, and that he's also really sort of destined, kind of voluntold to be the Crestomancy, which, if read Marvel comics or what have you, that's the equivalent of like being the Sorcerer Supreme. You're basically sort of the wizard that's got to defend everything.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want it, and he doesn't like it, and also he's not exactly his fault, but he's also super careless with his lives, and he just sort of winds up dying again and again and again. And it's in a way that's sort of like weirdly, darkly funny. I really asked myself the question, okay, so if I was a younger Diego, and if I was reading this, would I have been into it? And the answer is totally, because the characters are great. There's a lot of magic and a lot of world building, tons of world building, because we're kind of dealing with like its own like sort of multiverse.
Yeah.
And there's intrigue, but not too much. And there's also like learning that grown-ups are dumb, but not too much. And the idea of like, well, what if I don't want this destiny? What if I want something else? And it was just enjoyable from page to page. So that was just a very great recommend for my colleague. And one I feel in turn people should be reading as well if they like. If they like the Harry Potters and whatnot, give Diana Wynne Jones a chance. Check out The Lives of Christopher Chant. Which, if you want to turn it back to films, I feel like it should totally be adapted by Wes Anderson. It just feels like a Wes Anderson
cool.
movie along the way. He just hasn't realized it yet. Wes, if you're listening to this episode, and I know
sure
you
he is.
are, Lives of Christopher Chant, get the rights.
I'd love the idea of Wes Anderson listening to our podcast. He sees maybe the listing for it, Oscar snubs. He's like, I've been snubbed quite a few times.
I can relate to this.
Let's see what this library in Edmonton, Alberta has to say about it.
Exactly.
Well, that's interesting, though, because as somebody who doesn't have kids, the one thing that's been really cool about doing this show is I've heard about quite a few of these young adult fantasy books where they talk about world building. We were just talking actually earlier today, Caroline, about Land of Stories, which came up in our Kids Pop Culture Confessions episode, which Diego's daughter was also on. So it's kind of interesting to hear about these stories that talk about world building. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Caroline, what have you been enjoying lately?
Well, I've been waiting to talk about this one for a while. I knew immediately after I read it, I wanted to talk about it on the podcast. It was really exciting. It was one of those where you watch it, it's on order, it's in transit, it's available as you're getting ready, and I was so excited. It has mystery, it has tension, it has donuts. It is called Who Wet My Pants by Bob Shea, illustrated by Zachariah O'Hora.
So do we find out who wet this person's pants?
I don't want to give away the ending. It's an ending you won't see coming. But it's a story about Reuben, who is a bear, and he's at a scout camp-esque place. He arrives with his box of donuts, is ready to share with his friends, realizes somehow there's a problem with his pants. And he demands to know who did this.
Yeah.
And the rest of the book is about him retracing his steps, unraveling, interrogating the other campers to know who wet his pants.
I'm speechless right now because that sounds awesome. And by the way, great name for a bear, Reuben. Yeah.
The illustration in this, it's very whimsical is not the right word, but the animals have personality, even the background characters, just the whole setup of it is told with speech bubbles. So there's almost a cartoon comic feel to this picture book. It probably won't be for everyone, but if you...
I can't imagine who's going to
I think it's...
find a problem with this book.
My feeling is that people, when you see the title and the cover image, which has Ruben with his wet pants, it'll probably like self-select out of the people who maybe aren't as interested.
So this book actually sounds very entertaining.
Yes.
But what are the like recommended reading ages for it, I guess? Do you know?
Well, I mean,
nothing wrong with us reading it.
yeah, this is the thing.
I'm checking out it as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think it's, like many picture books, perhaps it is aimed at younger children. I think that there are a number of really interesting character traits that the friends have, and as you see kind of Ruben exploring this situation, different emotions like surprise, dealing with the unexpected, having empathy for your friends who might be in a situation like that. So from the very young to the young at heart, I would say.
I like to think Overdue Finds listeners, a lot of them young at heart.
Yeah.
If you're listening to the show. Us too, obviously.
Yeah. So how about you, Bryce?
So we did this probably a few months ago on the show, and we've talked about this a lot before. We have an amazing team here at EPL who helps out behind the scenes. So it's like editing, our show notes, which we always recommend, that has our list of everything we talk about. That's
coming up with ideas.
Yeah, coming up with
shows.
ideas. Thank you. Yeah, so we have an awesome team of staff here at EPL that helps do that. And so today I thought I would forfeit my pick. And I'm going to go with a recommendation from one of our members of the EPL Overdue Finds family, Haley Redpath, who is actually on the show for our Best of 2019 episode. So Haley recommends the TV show Grace and Frankie. So this is what Haley has to say. This TV comedy is unexpected and delightful. Meet Grace, played by Jane Fonda, and Frankie, played by Lily Tomlin, two very different characters whose lives are unexpectedly thrown together when their husbands, played by Sam Waterston and Martin Sheen, announce they're in love with each other. Expect to laugh a lot. This show is on Netflix, but we also have the first 3 seasons in our collection here at EPL, so you can borrow them on DVD.
And get caught up on Grace and Frankie's story.
Yeah, I haven't watched it myself, but I've seen it obviously posted on Netflix, and I know it's definitely been up for quite a few Emmys and everything, so it's supposed to be a great show, and if you're looking for something new to watch, check it out.
Absolutely.
All right, so today, we teased at the beginning of the episode, we're talking about Oscar snubs. When you hear this episode, the Academy Awards would have already happened. Maybe there's going to be some big snubs on there. I don't know. We're recording this in like late January, so we're gonna pretend that all the favorites won and everybody was happy with whoever won Oscars.
Like no Oscars has ever done before.
That's right, exactly. This 2020 will be the exception. But before we jump into talking about our choices, let's talk a little bit about what we mean by Oscar snubs. Of course, the nominees who should have won but didn't. Or maybe there's movies or actors who weren't even nominated that should have been. Diego, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
What criteria did you use when making your selections for today's show?
Right, so I was trying to think about like the sheer enormity of something that's been going on for 92 years. And I think that mainly for my own sanity, I only wanted to really look at the films that were up just in this century, in the 21st century, which is not to say that there weren't snubs before, but I know that the further in time that we go back, the less I've seen, like just on a personal basis. And also, I don't really think anyone like cares for my hot take on 1980s ordinary people. No one's going to get upset about that. If I make comments about Gary Cooper, no one's going to care. So let's just focus on things that at least have happened within our recent lifetimes.
Yeah.
I also want to point out here, I don't know if this wound up being an issue for you folks as well. When I refer to years, I'm referring to the years in which the movies were released. So if I'm talking about the 2019 Oscars, I mean the one that's airing right now in 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
You might think, sure, Diego, anyone can figure that out. But no, I've had to rewrite my notes twice because I can't keep it straight myself. So I promise to all the listeners, any of the facts that I mention are going to be correct. Any of the opinions that I have are guaranteed wrong.
You can't see it as you're listening, but I'm holding up my note sheet, which has a whole bunch of years on it that have just the last year, the last digit scribbled out and written to be one off.
This should not be confusing. We're very good at our jobs.
And
It kind of looks like speaking of the Oscars, I'm kind of getting some Beautiful Mind
Yes.
flashbacks here just with your writing of
yes, Beautiful Mind meets
Yes.
Good Will Hunting,
Yeah.
the board on there.
Definitely.
It's not your fault.
Yeah.
No.
So I think
It's not your fault.
I'm glad to hear that you've left all of the 1940s hot takes for me, because I have them.
Own it.
I have them, and some of them I feel more strongly about than the recent ones. But this was hard because I went into this thinking like, oh, absolutely, we need to talk about this. And then one of the things I struggled with was by saying someone deserved to win. I don't want to say another person didn't deserve to win
Yeah.
all the time, so there are some, I want to maybe celebrate the ones I consider snubs without putting down all of the other choices. But I had also thought going into it that I was going to be very firm on someone who was nominated but didn't win. I was going to be like, that's what we're going to talk about. And then I got to one of the categories and I was like, well, no, clearly I need to talk about someone who wasn't even nominated. So I went back on my own kind of hard and fast thinking.
Yeah, let's just kind of get that out of the way right now. Like, we're not here today to be like...
We're not haters.
We're not haters at all. And
No.
We're going to mention some movies that, maybe we feel maybe another movie should have won on. So that in no way means that movie's terrible, or maybe that performance by that actor isn't any good. We're just giving our own opinions on what we feel like if we were the ones choosing that year, that's what we would have awarded to. So I find it kind of interesting, actually. Diego, you were like, nobody wants to hear my takes on the 80s. Caroline's like, that's good because I got some hot takes on the 40s. Guys, I've got us covered for the 70s and 80s. So we're going to be good for this episode.
This is great.
A
Perfect.
great range of Oscar
Absolutely
picks.
perfect.
So I think we're ready then.
Yeah.
Let's dive in. We're going to start with Best Actress.
Yes.
Diego, who should have won?
Okay, so out of people that were actually nominated, but I feel like probably should have taken top prize, let's go to 2009. So the Best Actress that year was Sandra Bullock for The Blind Side. And yeah, like you had just mentioned, I'm actually not criticizing Sandra Bullock in The Blind Side because she played it well. She played Sandra Tui fine, just fine. But then I considered who she was up against, and I feel like there's someone that really even did a finer job. That's Carey Mulligan for An Education. Have you guys seen this one?
Mm-hmm.
I haven't. I know of it, but yeah.
No, I mean, and she plays that role with just with a lot of innocence and a lot of nuance, and you very much do get like her arc in this film, and I feel like it was probably even more spectacular to watch than Bullock in The Blind Side. And again, out of all my sort of like snubs, I feel like this is like the mildest, really, because I'm just talking about someone who did like a great performance to someone who did an excellent performance.
Yeah.
We're going to probably come across this a few times in this. I've written down, and actually it's funny because I thought about 2009.
Sure.
I don't remember exactly which one I was going to pick over Sandra Bullock, but that one did stand out to me.
Yeah.
I find sometimes with the award winners that sometimes Hollywood recognizes the person versus necessarily the film. Like,
we are coming back to this.
Yeah, we've and we're going to touch on this in a couple of later nominations, but it's like we've snubbed this person for so long. They are due. We're going to give it to this person because they didn't win for this other one.
And you do see that happen every once in a while. I think DiCaprio's probably this one of those examples. Scorsese's one of those examples as well. Whether or not they did or didn't deserve for their ultimate victories is kind of just besides the point. But anyways, just staying on the Best Actresses here. There's a couple of years in which I feel a couple of actresses were not nominated. And I just don't understand it. I just feel like, they're just sort of unjustly passed over. For 2012, little movie called Frances Ha, starring Greta Gerwig. Now, Gerwig, right now, we're all excited about because of her directing for Little Women.
Also snubbed this year.
Yes.
Also snubbed this
Best
year
Director.
as Best Director. But her performance in Frances Ha is absolutely just sort of career-making. I don't know why she wouldn't have been picked up that year. And this year's Oscars, by which I mean the 2019 Oscars, where the heck is Lupita Nyong'o for us? She is tremendous in this movie, and she's nowhere to be seen. I mean, I actually forgot that Us came out this year. Mm-hmm. I think maybe a lot of producers and Academy voters have also similarly forgotten this fact. But there's no denying that she is excellent in this.
I think there's also a horror bias with the
Sure.
Academy and other biases at play, as well as comedy, horror, some of the genre movies that we see. But with Lupita Nyong'o in Us, she gives two amazing performances. Mm-hmm. She's acting opposite herself, and they both should win an Oscar.
Yeah, no, and she's playing, I mean, without going into spoilers here, but she's playing two sides of scary.
Yes.
Which is just incredible, and she's just spellbinding in it. I don't feel like Us, itself is Best Picture for this year, but I mean, her performance is just hair-raising and an absolute standout.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I definitely think it was probably a victim of it being a horror movie, and then also, too, just the release of it. It was out, I believe it was out last March. So yeah. It's one of those weird things where Hollywood kind of forgets about their own, I think, sometimes. So, Caroline,
yes.
Best Actress.
After me saying that I was going to light up the 40s with my takes on this, I have last year where Glenn Close lost. She was in The Wife, and she lost to Olivia Colman in The Favorite. I love Olivia Colman. The Favorite was such an experience to watch the performances in it. She's fantastic. I'm not taking away Olivia Colman's Oscar, but Glenn Close is one of those. She should almost get a career Oscar at this point. She has 7 nominations. I think that she's such an interesting performer and someone who really deserves to be highlighted. Another one, if I'm going to go back a little bit further, was Holly Hunter over Cher in 1987. I would give it to Holly Hunter for broadcast news.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Moonstruck that year, such a great movie. So I kind of don't blame the Academy for maybe going that way, but obviously broadcast news is more of a well, they're both comedies.
They are, yeah.
Definitely you can see Cher, kind of flexing, I guess, the acting chops a little bit more in that one.
Sort of thing like the producers in a way, like, would you rather have Cher give an acceptance speech? Yeah. As opposed to merely Holly Hunter.
That's right, yeah.
Who did eventually win in 1993, 94, early 90s for the piano.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Bryce?
I was looking at this, and this one's interesting because I'm going to go with the same actress, and it was 2 years where this actress, in my opinion, was snubbed in the Best Actress category. I'm first of all going to start, we talked about horror movies earlier. Mm-hmm. The granddaddy of horror movies, The Exorcist. Ellen Burstyn for The Exorcist in 1973. She was nominated for Best Actress. She ended up losing to Glenda Jackson in a romantic comedy called A Touch of Glass. So I'm going to admit right now, I have not seen A Touch of Glass. I'm guessing the vast majority of people have also never seen A Touch of Glass. But if you go back and you watch The Exorcist, Ellen Burstyn plays the mother of Regan, who of course is the one possessed by the devil in that movie. She gives an outstanding performance. And I think maybe the reason I went with this one was I just recently listened to a podcast interview with William Friedkin, who directed The Exorcist, and talked about how the studio did not want Ellen Burstyn for this movie. Thought the movie was going to tank and they wanted Jane Fonda. Ellen Burstyn really pitched herself to the studio and the director fought for her. And we have one of the most classic horror movies to date. So,
first of all, I just want to say, I mean, I agreed on Ellen Burstyn. I'm amazed you didn't pick Linda Blair.
She was nominated for supporting actress, I think.
Supporting? I suppose.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she was. Okay. Yeah, I just looked at the Best Actress category for that year. But so the interesting part, too, about Ellen Burstyn is she actually ended up winning the very next year in 1974 for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. So she did get her Oscar.
And that's something, like, I know we've already touched on this, but when I was coming up with some of the people who I thought, well, I wanted them to win for this role, either before or after they were recognized. So it's hard to feel bad for them, but I think we still can have strong opinions about it.
And as I kind of tease with Ellen Burstyn, so she also was nominated again in the year 2000 for her role in Requiem for a Dream. The Best Actress winner that year was Julia Roberts for Erin Brockovich. Erin Brockovich is a great movie. Julia Roberts did an outstanding job in that movie, but I think that's, in my opinion, it's kind of similar to the Sandra Bullock one, where maybe the person was maybe awarded more so than the performance itself. But if you go back and watch Requiem for a Dream, I know it's such a downer, and we've recently talked about it on the show, but her role as Sarah Goldfarb, basically her character gets hooked on amphetamines, and it's just such a powerful performance. It's a powerful movie. I definitely think she probably should have won the Oscar that year. All right, so we've awarded our new Best Actresses. Let's talk about Best Actor. Caroline, I'm going to start with you this time. What was a year that kind of stood out to you here?
Well, I have a couple that maybe I'll come back to if you guys don't mention them, but I will go to 1940. You got it already. This one's a pretty classic one, though. Henry Fonda in The Grapes of Wrath. Huge performance. Really stood out and was not was nominated, did not win. He lost to Jimmy Stewart in The Philadelphia Story, which is hard because I love The Philadelphia Story. So I'm happy he won, but that was a makeup for the previous year when he did not win for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington because they gave it to Robert Donat in Goodbye Mr. Chips. So if there wasn't for this kind of domino effect, I think you would have seen Henry Fonda winning in 1940.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. We love our Simpsons references on this show. Let's not forget about Mel Gibson remaking that with Homer Simpson.
Yes.
Very powerful performance.
Yes. Hard to beat these days. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm kind of I'm tickled by the notion of, like, the Academy Awards just having this domino effect, but it never ending. Like, every year, it's like, oh, dang, we'll get you next year. Just start something good. We'll get you. We'll make sure.
Can you imagine the confusion that would add to our 1 year off ceremony?
Yes.
So you've got the year the film was released, the year the ceremony it's at, and then the makeup Oscar the following year. So we would be totally lost on that.
Academy, the person wins, the Academy's like, our bad. We got you. Here's your Oscar. Diego, how about you?
All right, so my Best Actor picks are going to get increasingly insane. I'm just going to let you know about this right now. Let's start about like an actual nominee. So 2016, this was the year that Casey Affleck won for Manchester by the Sea. Don't think he was the best part of that movie necessarily, but if you enjoyed him, that's fine. Who I really thought would give a stronger performance, even though I did not like the movie, was Denzel Washington in Fences. I do not recommend that you watch Fences necessarily. It is supremely stagey. I don't know why they shot it the way that they shot it. But you really can't deny the fact that it's Denzel Washington really just giving a long, non-stop powerhouse performance. And I honestly feel like that is a better example of craft than Casey Affleck in that year. But I also want to talk about some people that just weren't nominated, and I do not understand why. This one I can sort of understand because it's a little bit of a stunt in a way. But Christian Bale in 2005 for The Machinist. So this was a movie where he physically transformed himself for the role. And I can see both sides of the argument because, you know, what if he didn't have to? Was this all just like part of him just kind of like playing up how much he's given himself to the role? But we reward method actors all the time, like Brando and Daniel Day-Lewis and what have you. And if you watch the film, I mean, good grief, I mean, does he ever throw himself into this part? Like, he's very disturbed and he's very unsettling, and it's just an all-out full performance. I feel like he should have been nominated at least. So it's always sort of interesting when you bring up films that are basically foreign language films, films that just weren't really sort of picked up or discovered. So I understand why Denis Lavant would not have been nominated in 2012 for Holy Motors, because Holy Motors really didn't get discovered in North America at the time. But I really want to mention it because when I think about best actors, when you think about the montage, if you will, of everything that an actor does, Holy Motors is nothing but like a buffet of acting. So Lavant is just an actor that just never got any due in North America. He was in, I think people would probably know him best for a film called Beau Travail, which is not a good movie, but he is the best thing in the movie. And he is delightful in Holy Motors. The premise of this movie, which I will talk about at any given moment, is Lavant plays a strange sort of agent who is ferried around in a limousine, and he is driven from assignment to assignment, and all these assignments are seemingly random. His first assignment is to panhandle on a busy street, and then later he will do things like pretend to be a teenage girl's dad and argue with her, or perform in this very bizarre mocap session. He will kidnap Eva Mendes. He will duet with Kylie Minogue. He will lead an accordion band down the streets. And every different character that he has to play is played to the hilt. He is wonderful in this. And I feel if you really want to reward anyone for acting in that year, dear God, let's give it to Denis Lavant, or at least give him a little bit of recommendation there. And this last one here, I know how off it sounds. I know how off-kilter it sounds. But there was a great little underrated thriller in 2015 called The Gift, and it starred Jason Bateman. So let's actually talk about why Jason Bateman should have been nominated for an Academy Award. Because we're used to him sort of playing that sort of like comic goofball and what have you. And in this movie, without spoiling too much of it here, but he does this great subtle character shift where you start off seeing him as a nice guy. And then you realize that there's some real layers underneath him. And you start realizing that without even him being like forced to change, it's you, the audience, that start realizing how little about this guy you assumed was correct, and really just how different he is here. And I don't mean in that Walter White sort of way where like events force him to change. Like, no, he's just always been this way, and it's only through his performance that you see exactly who he's playing. Again, is Jason Bateman winning an Academy Award like the hill I want to die on? No, but sometimes you just want to watch the world burn.
That's right.
Yeah. The Gift, I do recommend that. The performances in that, the storytelling. Oh, I have such thoughts about the ending. But
yes.
Yeah, the Gift. Check it out.
Totally a perfect definition of an overdue find, if you will.
Yeah.
Great movie. So for me, I really struggled with this one because there's been a ton of great performances over the years, and I had like 5 to choose from on here, but I'm just going to go with one. Most recent one that I had on my list was in the year 2000, which saw Russell Crowe win for Gladiator.
Okay.
He did an amazing job in that movie. The movie itself won Best Picture that year. It's a classic. The actor who I thought probably should have won Best Actor that year, though, was Tom Hanks for Castaway. Now, this could also be a case of this guy has won so many times. Let's spread the love around here a little bit.
Yes.
But like Tom Hanks, if you think about that movie Castaway, it's really him acting opposite a volleyball for almost 2 hours. It's just him on the screen. There's very few actors who kind of have the presence and would be able to pull that movie off. And you look at the weight loss that he does for that movie, obviously, it's quite incredible, his performance in that movie. So to me, I would have given it to Tom Hanks for Castaway.
I had Tom Hanks on my list for Saving Private Ryan, and I mean, I'm not going to take it away from Roberto Benigni, but that whole 1998 Oscars is something that maybe we'll talk about later. But
come on.
But yeah, it's hard. Like, what do you do when someone has so many strong performances? It's hard to argue that Tom Hanks needs to have more awards.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think you can solidly do that if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Before we move on from Best Actor, I just want to say, and this is again because in one breath I will argue, no, it has to be about the performance, and it has to be about that year's competition. And then apparently in the next breath I'm saying, come on. But Can you believe Al Pacino did not win for either Godfather?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting 'cause if you look at Al Pacino, he of course ended up winning for Scent of a Woman. And what's funny about that is that pretty much ushered in the bad Al Pacino impressions of like the over-the-top Al Pacino, whereas he's pretty much the opposite of that in any of the Godfather films.
I'll go you one further. It may have been the start of the over-the-top Oscar performance.
Yeah.
Right? Like the bit that is so standout and so memorable that you're like, well, that's really, I remember him saying hoo-ah a lot, so clearly this was a strong performance. I remember Jack Nicholson saying, you can't handle the truth. Right? And I can't say that that's been the case like for every year or what have you, but there's just this notion of like what makes like an Oscar moment performance to the point where there's this theater sports game that used to be played, maybe is still played for that matter, which is literally just called Oscar moment, and it's nothing but that kind of acting where you're just trying to like make it like the biggest, most like flamboyant scene that you can, even if it's just something mundane like ordering a sandwich.
This is going to be the clip that they will show on the Oscars for that.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Great. So speaking of these great performances, they don't just happen in movies. There's a director. Which director's loss was the biggest snub in your mind?
What an amazing seg.
Thank you.
It's perfect.
Thank you. I'm gunning for my best original screenplay. It's the podcast starring Caroline and Bryce.
Should we start with Bryce on this one?
Sure.
We can. There's two here that really stood out. I'm going to mention the obvious one, though. I'm going to go back a little bit on this one. In 1968, a little director by the name of Stanley Kubrick was nominated for Best Director for a movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey, which today is kind of viewed as a masterpiece. Some people think it's a little overrated. I might be in that category myself, but you can't deny the impact that it's had on movie making and film.
Sure.
So that year he actually ended up losing to Carol Reed for Oliver. Nothing wrong with the story of Oliver, but we cannot, you go back and look at that and you're like, yeah, Stanley Kubrick should have won probably that year for 2001.
He went on to never win.
He has never won an Oscar. Yeah, unfortunately.
Hitchcock never won an Oscar.
That's right.
And that's 1958, which is my pick.
Oh, sorry.
No, excellent build on this. So a decade before Kubrick in 2001, we've got Vertigo, which was not even nominated for Hitchcock, and it was a critical success, but like public failure at the time. It made back its money and not much more. It didn't have a lot going for it, but then over time the overall critical kind of opinion on Vertigo has just kind of grown. But Hitchcock again never won competitive Oscar, but was not even nominated in 1958. The winner that year, Vincent Minnelli for Gigi, which had the distinction of being a Best Picture winner that won a whole slew of awards, none of them for acting.
Wow. So just probably costume,
song, some of the more technical pieces.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, about Vertigo, because Vertigo might be Hitchcock's visually most impressive movie.
Yes.
If you watch any of his films. A lot of people think Psycho, but Vertigo, for sure. Even if you haven't seen the movie, you've seen clips somewhere for it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I saw it a couple years ago. The Metro Cinema here in Edmonton was having a Hitchcock series, and I thought, I think I've seen Vertigo. And then I went and it was starting, and I was like, oh no, I have not seen Vertigo. Because once you see it, you remember.
Yeah. So Diego, what would be your pick?
So for Best Director, let's go back as early as I go here. So 2001. This was the year that Ron Howard won for A Beautiful Mind. I can't really say that was the best film that year. I don't know if I really liked Beautiful Mind that much 20 years ago. I don't feel like it's necessarily sort of aged well, even though it's really sort of like, brought about just sort of like that one twist that we've seen in like a ton of other films since, including The Joker, who really did not do it well. But less about that. Let's talk about who really should have won that year. So David Lynch put out just this great and freaky and very sort of altogether moving film called Mulholland Drive. I can see why it wouldn't have won. I can see why it would have left a lot of people in the dust. because while all the clues are there and all the pieces are there, Mulholland Drive doesn't necessarily care if you get it or not. It doesn't mean that it was badly put together, and it doesn't mean that it was badly directed. It just means that you really sort of need to rewatch and take time with it. And when you do, I mean, you see exactly just how much great work Lynch had put in to this movie. And I definitely think it was a much better job than Howard did that year. And in 2010, this is where I just start getting really mean. But Tom Hooper won for The King's Speech. I just wanted to take a moment to actually point out who Tom Hooper was up against that year. Give me a moment here.
Like the official envelope here.
I've got the official envelopes here.
Tom Hooper, director of Cats.
Yes, thank you.
Yes,
I was going to get to that point. The man who would eventually give us Cats has won an Academy Award. Who did he beat out that year? Darren Aronofsky, David O. Russell, David Fincher, the Coen brothers. No, none of those people should win the Academy Award. Let's give it to the man who will go on to give us Cats. I don't even like the King's... I like the King's Speech for the performance just fine. I feel like the direction is just odd and makes me ask questions, and I don't like and know. It just really brings up such a strong reaction on me. Who should have won that year? It should have been Aronofsky. Black Swan, easily, because that is just a great, thrilling, taut movie. The pacing is fantastic in it. I feel like all the various artistic decisions in it were great. I just simply don't understand why it wasn't Black Swan, why it wasn't Aronofsky instead of Hooper.
King's Speech is very much like an Academy Award movie, like most of the people voting at the time.
Yes.
Definitely would have appealed more, say, than Black Swan, for sure.
Yeah. In preparing for this, I was reading that someone's take on it was that the King's Speech was... It was like it was a character piece designed to get Colin Firth the Oscar.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden it started winning all of the other awards out of nowhere.
Yeah, I think Colin Firth really did, him and Jeffrey Rush really did the Lord's work on that movie. I will not question that whatsoever, but it just wasn't the movie for them to do it for. I just want to mention someone who was not nominated, and it makes no sense. But in 2006, Alfonso Cuarón was not nominated for Children of Men, and he honestly should have. Cuarón has given us everything from Gravity to the only watchable Harry Potter movie. And honestly, I mean, Children of Men is right up there. He was not nominated that year. I cannot fathom why.
Yeah, amazing movie.
Yeah. I also think Ava DuVernay was a snub on Selma. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned her.
Also, before we move on, apparently Best Director has us really worked up, because there's two here I just want to quickly mention, because I know we are running out of time. Francis Ford Coppola, 1979, of course, directed the masterpiece Apocalypse Now, lost to Robert Benton for the divorce drama Kramer versus Kramer. Probably at the time, Kramer versus Kramer, of course, is about divorce. I know that was kind of a big issue, really, in real life at the time, so maybe it should have won, or that's probably a reason why it did win. But looking back now, Francis Ford Coppola should have definitely won for Apocalypse Now. And the biggest one, Martin Scorsese losing to Kevin Costner in 1990 for Goodfellas.
Yes.
So Scorsese, he did eventually get his Oscar. It was for The Departed. Not his best movie. Kevin Costner, Dances with Wolves is a great movie. I personally think Goodfellas is a masterpiece. Some people, including myself, put it up there with The Godfather as far as the best mafia movies ever. More people today talk about Goodfellas than they do Dances with Wolves, but I think he definitely should have. That's what he should have got his Oscar for.
If he wasn't going to get it for Raging Bull.
Yes, that was another one too. 1984, I think it was Ordinary
People,
which you brought up earlier. All right, so finally we're here, the big one, Best Picture. Which movie deserved to take home the title? Caroline, I'm going to start with you on this one.
I have a note on my notes here that the Oscars kind of preemptively got in on this with the whole Moonlight La La Land from a couple years ago. And just reading back, when they announced the wrong name, I just had this gut reaction to going back to that moment, I do think Moonlight was the right choice there. So thumbs up on that.
Between those two films,
Between
yes.
those two movies. Be as a cliche, I'm going to go with Citizen Kane for Best Picture. It did win for screenplay, but lost for Best Picture. I think that it's one that kind of gets overlooked. That sounds really weird to say, but I think enough people kind of say like, oh yeah, whatever about it, that it overlooks some of the cinematography, the storytelling, the acting, all of what is present in that movie. It is a good movie. You should watch it.
That's a perfect one. I know that's came up on a lot of lists that I was looking at in research for this episode. Diego?
Got a few here. 2001. I've already said my piece on A Beautiful Mind here. But who really should have won that year? It should have been a lesser-known movie called In the Bedroom, which starred Sissy Spacek. And I'm already blanking on the gentleman's name here.
Something.
It was Tom Wilkinson.
Yeah.
Tom Wilkinson and Marisa Tomei in it, and directed by a Todd Field, based off of a Andrew Dubus story. But just this absolutely just sort of note-perfect drama that really slowly morphs into a thriller and really sort of asks the question, like, how do you deal with grief? How do you deal with loss? And exactly where are you going to sort of let grief take you? I know that it really didn't get as many views as, say, A Beautiful Mind, but Good Grief, an absolutely fantastic movie from top to bottom.
That one was also kind of redemptive for Marisa Tomei, who had been the butt of jokes for a while after she won for My Cousin Vinny, and there was saying that, they must have read the wrong name, and did she really deserve it against the actresses she was up against? And then along came In the Bedroom and kind of silenced some of the people who didn't see her as a strong actress.
It would still take her a while. She would still need a while to really sort of like power out of that, too.
Yeah, I really like her in My Cousin Vinny. I think she's fantastic in that.
2010, I may have mentioned my problems with The King's Speech. Here's what should have won. 127 Hours, Black Swan, Inception, The Kids Are All Right, The Social Network, Toy Story 3, or anything, just anything other than The King's Speech. What a great year for movies, and I still do not understand what happened there. I'll be okay.
Are you sure?
I'll be okay.
It's been 10 years.
It's been 10 years and it still hurts.
The pain is still there.
The following year, which is a little bit difficult here because I really did enjoy The Artist, which won that year. The Artist really is a good movie, but it's also one of those movies that is sort of about Hollywood, and Hollywood loves to vote for Hollywood. So I can sort of see how it was sneaked ahead of the film that I feel really was the best of that year. That is Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. Tree of Life has a few things going against it. It's weird, it's long, and it's also kind of slow. But when you actually sort of get a chance to watch it, it really sort of grows on you, and you wind up being so enthralled by this story about coming of age with just these parents that try their best and don't always know what they're doing. And then there's little things like, why did the movie show us dinosaurs at the beginning? That was not properly explained, but you don't even wind up minding, because just if you want a movie that is the embodiment of just sort of slowly washing over you and slowly winning you over, it's that one. It is gorgeous. It is wonderful, and I like it even more than The Artist. And then there was 2013, where we wound up giving it to 12 Years a Slave. An amazing movie, to be sure, but it was also up against Spike Jonze's Her, which I thought was very beautiful and subtle and well performed and complex. Just complex in the way that it talks about just sort of like human emotions and relations better than just a ton of movies ever will. It also had this sort of fun kind of neo-sci-fi twist to it, but that's sort of irrelevant. It was very much about what it's like to sort of fall in love and how are we going to talk about love.
And I was completely won over on the Scarlett Johansson deserved an Oscar nomination as the voiceover in Her, which it comes up every couple of years around voiceover performances or motion capture performances.
Like Andy Serkis for his roles.
Absolutely.
Which he is amazing for, let's be clear.
Absolutely. And when you see like some of his work in Planet of the Apes, the series, and you kind of go, yeah, I could campaign for this.
Like, pop culture has been kind to, like, say, Lon Chaney.
Yeah.
For his Frankenstein performances, where we talk about, he played the monster with such soul. He was such a soulful monster. And Circus in Planet of the Apes is just as good, like just mesmerizingly good as an ape of all things.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, her had me on board with a voice-only nomination, which didn't happen, but maybe someday. Bryce?
I don't think we're far off from that, like a motion capture performance winning an Academy Award. This one was the easiest one for me. I teased this last episode. I just want to quickly mention, I also think in 1990, Goodfellas should have won over Dances with Wolves that year too. Anyway, I've talked about that already. The one for me, which is one of the biggest robberies in Oscar history, 1998, Shakespeare in Love won that year for Best Picture.
Okay.
The movie that should have won that year, Saving Private Ryan. 1998 was really, for me, the big year where I learned about Oscar campaigns and how they work. Not necessarily the Best Picture wins, but who's spending the most, who's whining and dining the most people in order to get your movie to win. To me, Saving Private Ryan was robbed in 1998. Diego, you have a look on your face.
I could be on that. I'm not going to argue with you on this one. Yeah, I think it's probably one of my more favorite Spielbergs, and just one where he just went for a lot of things and took a lot of risks and succeeded in almost all of them. Is it a perfect movie? No, but it was an impactful movie, and it was a thrilling movie, and I think we can even sort of, like, with time, just look back on it, and it still holds up.
Absolutely. I don't want to be over dramatic. I think it's a groundbreaking movie as well, with its depiction of war and that landing in Normandy as well. So, great movie. Caroline, I think you feel a little bit differently than me on this one.
No, I was joking when we were getting ready for this. I was asking Bryce if I needed to mount my Shakespeare in Love defense, but I'm on board. I think this was one, I think when you frame it like you did around the Oscar campaign, Miramax was famous throughout particularly the mid to late 90s for creating these movies, and then just the campaign beyond it. I'm thinking about 1998 being the year you learned what a broken heart felt like.
That's right.
So,
and I was so mad when it happened.
Yeah.
And I've never forgiven the Academy.
We've talked in the past about how you enjoy Quentin Tarantino's movies. I thought you were going to go with 1994.
I thought about it, but you know what? At the time, Forrest Gump was a force to be reckoned with.
It's hard.
You go back and look at the movies that were nominated in 1994. It was Pulp Fiction was included in there. Shawshank Redemption was another one.
Oh, Stephen King and Quentin Tarantino.
I know.
94 was your year.
It was my year. But you know what? At the time, I loved Forrest Gump. But now you go back and look at it, I would definitely given it to... Actually, you know what? If I had to vote, I would probably give it to Shawshank Redemption in 1994.
Interesting.
Yeah. But that's okay. Forrest Gump's all right.
Yeah. So, Bryce, before we get to our roundtable questions, can you let everyone know what we'll be chatting about on our next episode, which will be available on Friday, February 28th?
We teased this at the beginning of the episode, Caroline, and it's back, and it's bigger than ever. I, of course, am talking about the Overdue Finds March Madness Tournament, which, of course, is returning for the second year.
I wish I had that air horn sound effect.
In 2019, of course, as we talked about earlier, The Princess Bride was voted to be the best movie based on a book. This year, we have a brand new theme, new brackets, and there's going to be some brand new arguments about the selection. So, listeners, you're going to hear it first. This year's theme is the best of the 2010s. So, we, of course, will be talking about movies, but we're also going to be talking about TV during the last decade. The best books, the best music. So tune in on February 28th to hear all about it and watch EPL.ca/podcast on how you can play along. When you're hearing this episode for the first time on February 14th, next week, watch our website because we will probably have our bracket available for people to start filling out.
I can't wait. I'm so excited
I'm
about
excited.
this.
We have a meeting next week to
Yeah.
talk about what's going to make the top 64 picks, and
Yeah.
I have a feeling there's going to be some heated debates.
And just watching the first March Madness, but just watching the Facebook and the Twitter battles that would emerge when every bracket was sort of up for contention was just sort of thrilling and a little bit nail-biting. Kind of like with the Oscars.
Just like it. That was perfect. Great way to bring it all back.
There you
Yeah,
are.
I think I'm going to have to maybe seed my Oscar for Best Segue on this. I think the true winner has emerged.
We'll be debating this like 10 years from now on the show.
I'll defend it in 25 episodes.
That's right. All right, so we're running out of time, but quickly, our roundtable questions. Diego, what one person who hasn't won an Oscar would you most like to see win one?
Oh my gosh, one person who, now I have to think about the people that I enjoy who haven't won Oscars here. Is it a cop out at this point to pick Hitchcock? Because I feel like that
Not at
is
all.
kind of like the greatest oversight. And I doubt whether or not he very much would have cared either. But let's say Hitchcock for Vertigo. Let's just sort of like use that as the final validation of the man's impressive career.
Yeah, and if he shows up to accept it, that would be pretty great.
They'd have to play him on too. Do.
Highest rated Oscars ever. Caroline, how about yourself?
Honestly, my reaction was like, other than me. But I think the person, I talked about Glenn Close earlier in the episode, someone who is kind of right up there with nominations is Amy Adams. I would love to see her win an Oscar for something.
What's your standout for Adams?
Arrival.
Sure.
I don't even know if she was nominated for that, but she was
Yeah, I don't
she was
remember.
really strong in that.
Agreed.
For me, this one was really tough. I wrote down, but then I realized this person won actually 2 Oscars already. I actually had Quentin Tarantino down.
It's not enough.
It's not enough. He deserves more than 2 Oscars. He, of course, won for original screenplay for both Pulp Fiction and Django Unchained. It would be cool to see him win Best Director. But you know what? I'm going to go with an acting category on this one. Somebody who I think really is a very underrated actor, but of course everybody kind of views him, I think, a little bit differently because of he's such a huge superstar, and that's Tom Cruise. Mm-hmm. He's done some great work over the years, such as like Magnolia, Jerry Maguire, Color of Money. He's had some fantastic performances, and I think that's somebody who's due to win one.
Can I change my answer now?
Sure.
Now that I have time to think about it, Jason Bateman.
Yeah, he'd be very good.
There you have it. Let the world burn. Jason Bateman.
He's actually doing really interesting work. The roles he's picking.
Yeah, The Outsider now on HBO's. It's
true.
fantastic.
I can see it.
All right, so Caroline,
Yes.
you've won an Oscar.
I know. I can hear the music playing me off already.
That's right. It's the Overdue Finds theme.
On there.
Who would you thank in your acceptance speech?
I would thank whoever is involved in the movie. I would thank my family, and then I would want to thank more people, but I would forget because I would not be bringing note cards up with me. So probably then get overwhelmed and say the wrong thing, and then have to like tearfully make up for it in the press room.
Diego, how about you?
I would go on stage and I would tearfully thank Joey and Wheels and Snake and Spike, and then all like the older Canadian people watching at home, we were like, is he just naming kids from the original Degrassi? And no one else would understand that. So I think if anything, that would just be sort of like my little shout out to the Canadian Gen Xers.
I like that. That would be amazing. It would definitely be a viral moment because all the Americans would be like, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
And it would slowly kind of make its way to the back of the room eventually, and Canadians would love you for it.
Yeah.
You'd become an icon if you did that.
After they stripped me of my award.
That's right. That's right. You would not be invited back ever.
Not so much.
For me, of course, you guys didn't mention it. You got to thank the Academy.
Oh, yeah.
That's like the most obvious one.
I just assumed that was a given.
Yeah.
See, this is what I'm apologizing for in the press room.
That's right. For me, though, you got to go with the spouse. There's been lots of Academy Awards in the past where, maybe a spouse or somebody wasn't thanked. So, of course, I'd have to thank Cheryl. And, of course, the amazing cast and crew on the film. So that's who I would thank anyway. So, Diego, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, you're always welcome back. Is there anything happening at Idlewild Branch, which, of course, is where you work out of, that people should check out?
I think really the big thing, and it's equally true for Idlewild as it is for all of our other branches. I guess it depends on when this episode actually comes out, but Family Day. Family Day is coming up soon, and we are starting to gear up and ready to welcome everyone for what we at one point were calling sort of open houses, but really just sort of the Beyond the Books open house as well. So if you ever wanted to come down to your EPL branch and sort of learn more about what we do, if you're not really familiar with the day-to-day workings of the library and you do want to sort of see what we can offer, we are welcoming all kinds of families on Family Day for a chance to sort of partake in some activities, to learn about your branch and the people that are there, and for that matter, maybe even give you a little bit of a taste of what's coming up for spring break.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about Family Day in our last episode, and so this episode comes out February 14th. Family Day is the 17th, so for those of you listening to this episode a little bit early, definitely go to our website and check out what we've got going on for Family Day.
So we hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Make sure that you're subscribed so that you automatically get new episodes. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We love getting reviews, and if you like what you hear, tell a friend about the show.
So don't forget, we'll have a link to everything that we talked about in the show notes. So if you want to share your Oscar thoughts, maybe there were some snubs that we didn't talk about today, email us at podcast@EPL.ca or go to Twitter and use the hashtag EPL Overdue Finds and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.